Who knows?
He is among the great writers of his time. He's a 6-time National Sports Writer of the Year for his singular work for Sports Illustrated, a multimedia force for both NPR's Morning Edition and HBO's Real Sports. He is the author of more than a dozen books, and his latest, The Entitled, is in bookstores now. He is, of course, Frank Deford, and he is good enough to join us now. Frank, again, the book is The Entitled. It is a work of fiction. How'd you settle on the narrative?
This is an idea that I had in my mind for a long time, Josh. Athletes feeling that they deserve everything, that they are entitled. And yet I also wanted to write a story about an old manager, an old sort of inside baseball guy. So it's a story of two guys, the superstar, Latin superstar, Jay Alcazar, and he gets in trouble, and his old manager, Howie Traveler, who's one of these bushers who's hung around all his life and finally made it to the big leagues.
Yeah, one of the quadruple A guys who hung on. Again, it's really, you mentioned, it's a relationship, the manager and the hotshot superstar. Really, though, it also seems you're looking at the chasm between two eras.
Oh, yes.
And when you, especially somebody who's seen both, what sort of chasm are we talking about here?
I'm telling you, what happened more than anything else with ball players in any sport, and this could have been a basketball book, a football book, it's about athletes. Mm-hmm. When athletes made so much money that they didn't have to work in the off season, that's when the gap came. Because all of a sudden they were in that cocoon all year round. They didn't have to go back and work in the hardware store with real people for 4 or 5 months a year. And that's, I think, where it changed. But of course, just the fact that they make so bloody much money.
And that it's guaranteed. I've always submitted to that when you, especially in baseball and basketball, sports where the money is guaranteed, they don't need the media. They don't even have to be nice to people because the money, when they sign that contract, it's all coming to them.
I have a character who comes into the story, almost sort of a Greek chorus, a guy named Mickey Huey, who's a little bit of me, old journalist, and he says to the superstar when he first meets him, when the kid is just the first draft choice, hasn't gotten to the big leagues yet, he says, "You don't need me anymore. Nobody needs me. I came into this a very important appliance. I'm going to go out a piece of bric-a-brac because you don't need me anymore." And of course, he points to the television set. As long as you're on that, pal, then there's no use for us guys with the pen and pencil.
You know, you could tell so many stories, and one of my favorites is when you were with SI in the 60s, you were actually in the locker room with the Lakers.
Nobody believes that story.
It's a remarkable story, and I guess, speaking to the character as well, how much of this book is a personal commentary for you?
Oh, a lot of it is. A lot of it is what I've known through the years, what I've picked up, as I say, the character Mickey Huey, who's a small character, but that's kind of me. That's given me a chance to rant, okay?
Well, how about Frank in the locker room with the Lakers? It's a great story. I love it.
I mean, the story is not just that I was with the Lakers. The story is I sat down for 10 minutes with Jerry West after he just lost the series, all by myself. Then I go across to the locker room and spend 10 minutes with Bill Russell, who just won the series. Now, first of all, you can't get in the locker room now. You know, they have them in a theater. So it's all changed. But I've been around these guys so long. When the first person I sent the book to, with a great deal of trepidation, was to Mike Schmidt. I wanted a ball player to see it. And he called me up in about 2 days. He said, "I didn't know you played in the majors for 10 years. I didn't even know it." Meaning, hey, you got it right. But that's just by osmosis. If I didn't get it right after all the years of knowing these guys, I'm pretty dumb.
And Mike Schmidt did call it a baseball masterpiece, in case you were wondering. I also wonder, somebody as learned as you, who has seen it all, did you learn anything in the process of writing this book about the modern game?
I think that when you put things down on paper, whether you're a kid writing a term paper or an old man writing a novel, it crystallizes them in your mind. So the things that maybe I hadn't thought about that were just below the surface, when you start typing away, they come up. I've always said that I think with my fingers. You know, I'm much better at that. And so, yeah, little things would people say, "Hey, why didn't I think of that before?" Or it would bring it back to me, that kind of thing.
As a former ink-stained rich myself, and somebody who was lucky enough to share a masthead with you for a few years, what is your process? What goes into spending as much time with these characters as you do? What's an average writing day for you?
I'm the normal guy who writes in the morning. Very few guys. Every now and then you'll find a night owl. I don't think I've ever met anybody who writes in the afternoon because your body clock is down.
Yep.
So I get up, have a big meal, like a training meal, sit down at the typewriter. I'm not one of these disciplined people who can get up at 4:30 in the morning. Hey, I'm too old for that. And so I sit down and really work until I begin to run down. And that can change. If you're right and you're hot, And I'll tell you something, Josh, it's really weird, and if you haven't written fiction, you don't know it. Sometimes when you really get into a book, the characters start to talk to you. Yeah. I mean, I'm not giving anything away because it happens in the first chapter. There is a possible rape. And that is the thread throughout the book. Did the superstar rape this woman? He said, she said, date rape, you know, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. He pretty much told me, as we went along, how to play it out.
Remarkable.
Yeah, it's mystical, but it does happen.
And you said typewriter. Do you really write?
No, I mean computer now. Scared me for a long time.
I was going to have to stay there.
Oh, no, you finally have to do that. You have to give in to technology.
You're a busy man, so what's next for you?
I'm actually working on a play right now. It's just a subject that seemed to me, and by the way, I've never had a play produced in 40 years, so I may be absolutely crazy.
I have a feeling you're not absolutely crazy. You just didn't get around to a play yet.
But the book it's very exciting because it's already in its third printing, and it's only been out 5 days.
5 days, by the way. 5 days, everybody. May 16th it hit, and it's in the third printing.
So we're, you know, it's a good beach read. It's a good book for Father's Day, and I don't know, any sports fan I think would like it.
I'm sure there's one sports fan in particular who would have liked it if he was still here with us. I mentioned your prolific career. I can't help but think when I heard you were coming on, the first name that jumped to mind was David Halberstam. Yeah. You are twin titans who walked the earth together and saw a whole lot. We have lost David Halberstam recently, died tragically in a car accident. What did you think when you heard the news?
I was absolutely stunned, and I'll tell you particularly why, because the book he had started to work on. This guy's 73 years old. He's got one book coming out in September on the Korean War. He's already starting to work on another one. I mean, you know, hey. But the book he was starting to work on was the New York Giants versus the Baltimore Colts, 1958, greatest game ever played. I grew up in Baltimore. So I was talking to David in the weeks before this about who he should see in Baltimore, giving him all. So we were very close at that time. He, by the way, was nice enough before he died, obviously before he died, to give me a very nice comment on the book, which really made me feel good. He's one of a kind. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know anybody who is as good a reporter as David Halberstam. Mm-hmm. Not the greatest writer in the world, a very good writer, but as a reporter, nonpareil. Nobody better.
I tell you what, he wrote one of the great basketball books of all time, The Breaks of the Game, if you see it, about the changing into the modern NBA following the Trailblazers, the late 70s. And when I met him, I told him, you wrote in such long paragraphs. You made us all believe we could still do that. He ended the Vietnam War arguably with the best and the brightest. But as a sports fan, his sports books, he made a point of saying, I wrote them from a fan's perspective. Did you have that sense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we would talk about it all the time. He was a fan. He was also an outdoorsman. He loved to go fishing, and he loved to go to games, talk about games. I think that was an escape from him. He would usually write a very serious book about politics or business, mm-hmm. and then he would alternate that, as he did with his last book, The Korean War, and then he was going to go into the Colts and the Giants. My favorite was his one on Ted Williams and the teammates, Dor Pesky and Dom DiMaggio. I just, teammates, that was just an absolute classic. I read it and said, oh, why wasn't I smart enough to think of it?
Yeah.
And then I probably couldn't have done it anyway.
Frank, you've done pretty well for yourself.
Yeah, I have done well for myself, and I think that this would be something new, because most sports books, most sports novels don't sell because people would rather see the games, right?
Yeah.
Why see make-believe when you got the real thing? But this has a big chance, and so
again, it is in its third printing. It is the entitled. It is, of course, by Frank Deford, who is good enough to sit next to me. And if we would beg and plead, would you sit tight, wait for a commercial? I want to ask you about some of the day's big sports events. Get your take.
Be delighted.
Wonderful. Again, it is the entitled by Frank Deford. I will be asking him, among others, how he feels about a part-time $28 million heir. He is the one, the only Frank Deford. He's going to stick around. Go nowhere.